Hello my friends, and welcome back to my channel. Okay, so today I have a really fun video this is something that I'm always looking for in all of my books, but especially in a romance, and I feel like sometimes it can be hard to find, but sometimes it can also be hard to define. So I have some books here to recommend for you. All of these are books that I have read this year. These are all romances that feel sweepingly romantic. And so when I think of a sweeping romance, I think of something that has a grand scope or a grand view. So a lot of the times they have maybe different unique settings where they go to several different places, or usually it's a romance that spans many years that has an epic feeling to it, something that has a really broad vision of the different emotions that the characters are feeling. So it's not just one isolated event, but there's a lot of different things contributing to maybe why this couple fell in love and why they're having a hard time staying together. So I have some great recommendations here for you. All of these overall have a very romantic feel, in my opinion, and that's what also put them on the list, is because sweeping romances to me are deeply romantic. They usually have some amount of angst, usually kind of a lot, in order to keep them apart for a great many years, and they often travel to different locations. So the first book that I want to recommend for you is one that is by Kennedy Ryan, and it is Before I Let Go. This is going to be her newest release, coming out in November. It comes out November 15th. This is a second chance romance with a little bit of an older couple. This is also they're divorced, so it's not really a marriage in trouble, but they're divorced, second chance at love. It is Josiah and Yasmin, and they are one of my favorite couples that I have ever read about in my entire life. I think Kennedy Ryan got their love story so perfectly. This book was deeply emotional, and as is typical of Kennedy Ryan, it does deal with some heavier topics that could be potentially triggering, so I'm going to list those right now. There's miscarriage, loss of child, divorce, grief, things like that. But in another typical Kennedy Ryan fashion, she handles them with such grace and care. It never feels gratuitous. It never feels just like trauma thrown in for trauma. This is about a couple who is just recently divorced, and they're struggling to move on. They still have a lot of feelings for one another. They had a tragedy happen in their marriage that really was difficult for both of them to heal through. This book has a big emphasis also on men in therapy, which I thought was beautiful and wonderful to see, and just the power of this love, the chemistry this couple had, I 1000% believe this couple is a soulmate. I love this book so much. It's going to be on my favorites of the year. And when I think of a sweeping romance, oftentimes they're historicals, but this is one of the few contemporaries that I feel really fits the bill for a sweeping romance. Another book that I want to recommend is one that I recently read and adored, and it is Restore Me by J.L. Seegers. This is another second chance romance, and this one also feels very much like they are soulmates. So this is the story of our heroine and our hero, who meet when they are brand new at college, and the heroine is actually drunk. They have this meeting, and the hero feels so drawn to her, and she obviously feels drawn to him too. They have this great connection. Nothing happens between them, but just this soul level connection. And, he ends up taking her back to her apartment. He's worried she's not going to remember him, so he leaves her a note with his name and things like that. And time passes. She eventually ends up falling in love with his best friend because she has completely forgotten their soul level meeting. So then her husband, the hero's best friend, passes away, so she's now a widow, and it's been 4 years since she's been a widow, and she's starting to feel just very lonely, but also struggling with grief and a little bit of feeling responsible for what happened to her husband, and she's struggling to move on. She's pretty soon forced into a working relationship with Dom, who is the hero who she had met initially in college, and they have a very antagonistic relationship, which is largely fueled by Dom pushing her away and also feeling a little bit of resentment that she didn't remember him. Oh my gosh, you guys, this is one of my favorite romances I've read this year. This is probably in my top 3. This is definitely up there with the Kennedy Ryan. It was deeply emotional. It was very, very moving. It was powerful. And just the way that this man loved her was a thing of beauty. Watching them work through all of their issues was fantastic. I loved this book so much, and I highly recommend it. And this one definitely fits the bill for a sweeping romance. Now I have some historicals I'm going to recommend for you. One of them is another one that I read this year. It's Heart in the Highlands. Actually, all of these books are books I've read this year, except for one, which is one that I will always think of when I think of a sweeping romance. This is a very interesting book because starts out as a marriage of convenience, which then ends up forming this very tentative first love, which is very, very sweet, and it's honestly very endearing. They have their wedding night, and the heroine is starting to think that, maybe this marriage will work out. Maybe we can have a love match. They start to have feelings for one another, and then the hero, because, he has daddy issues, and his dad is not going to want him to, marry this girl, and he wants him to have an heir, so he ends up actually abandoning her, and they're separated. Her heart is broken. So this is, again, a marriage in trouble. They're still married, and she ends up having a baby. Pretty soon the hero comes back because of plot reasons, and the rest of the book is basically him trying to get her forgiveness and feeling a lot of regret and sorrow for abandoning her, and it is full of just her very graceful, loving concern for her child and wanting to be a family, but she's also not a pushover. She's not going to completely forgive him right away. She's going to make him work for it, but the grace that she approaches that with is really very endearing, and it's something that I haven't seen in a lot of historical romances before, and I just thought it was really beautiful and sweet, and the setting was absolutely lovely. It's set in Scotland. This is one of my favorite books of the year too. Not all of these are going to be my favorite books of the year, but a lot of them are. So the next book that I have is The Duke by Kerrigan Byrne. So this book is another one that I think Kerrigan Byrne does sweeping romances really, really well. I honestly was going to include The Highwayman, which I think fits the bill exactly for a sweeping romance, but I feel like everybody has recommended that, and not very many people talk about The Duke, which is one of my favorite books of hers. It does have a pretty unlikable hero who has some pretty severe trauma and pain, which definitely forms how he treats the heroine and people in his life. And because of that, because of his chronic pain, I felt like I was really able to understand him and not necessarily excuse his behavior towards her, but sort of understand why he was acting like that. This is another one where they met when they were young. They had a lot of passion and a lot of feelings for one another, and then they're separated. He ends up injured, and she is nursing him back to health, and he doesn't realize that's who this young woman was, and it's just really, really beautiful. I love seeing couples, heroes, heroines work through some legitimate trauma that isn't necessarily like trauma porn. Some issues that are relatable no matter what time period the book is set in. And I think that's exactly what happened here. And just the powerful way that these two loved one another, the time that was passing, I just felt like this was just so, so perfect. And I loved it personally. I know a lot of people don't like this hero, but I think that if you like more complex characters and more complex motivations, and specifically if you like a gray hero, I think you would really enjoy this. Now, this is one of the books that I always think of when I think of a sweeping romance, and it is The Duke by Catherine Ashe. This is one of my favorite historical romances. Her writing style is really absolutely beautiful. I think she has a great command of words, and her prose is just stunning. But something that I really love that she did here is this is another second chance romance. A lot of sweeping romances for me are often second chance because I think that it gives you the time where they're separated and then to try and come back, and those feelings are always still there, lingering. But this one was very unique because the heroine is, she's married to a minister, and they go to Jamaica where, he's going to preach to these people, and they're hit with a tropical storm, and she ends up stuck in a basement trying to survive this tropical storm with the Duke, who is actually a Navy officer at the time. And they're both stuck in this basement, and that is one of my favorite scenes of all time because they both believe that they're going to die, they're not going to survive this storm, and they don't immediately go into ripping each other's clothes off and, just going at it right there. Instead, what they do is they have this connection, they're talking, they're relating to one another, they're feeling feelings for each other. And they're doing these very tentative touches, like he brushes a finger across her hand, and I just I don't know, I just lost my mind there. But it was such a powerful scene to me, and the way that they had so much both emotional and physical chemistry really propelled the rest of the story for them to find their way back to one another, and it was fabulous. I loved it so much. Okay, now for a contemporary romance that I think fits the bill for a sweeping romance is Don't Kiss the Bride by Carrie Ann Cole. So this is a contemporary romance. It's an age gap romance. And the thing that I think makes me feel like this is sweeping is that it does take some time, but also I think it largely has to do with the characters' personalities, who I think are very sensitive and also they have that sense of vulnerability and wanting to have intimacy with one another, and just very gradually opening up a very tentative trust to see, how it's going to be received and how the other person is going to actually feel about them. And it's just so lovely. I know that like age gaps aren't for everyone. Honestly, they're not for me a lot of the time, but for the reason that I just talked about their emotions, how they felt like very quiet, but also like a quiet longing for each other. It was just so beautiful. And also the heroine, I do think, like, I hate to even say this because this kind of is annoying to me, but her life circumstances have forced her to appear to be a little bit more grown up. She is basically living on her own, even though she's like 17 or 18. And I just really had a lot of sympathy for her, and the hero just really stepped up, and not in a romantic way at first, in a very friendly way, to want to take care of her. And this is also an arranged marriage, and I do think that it works here. And I just loved this book. I thought it was fantastic. So this one, the feelings that I had while reading this, specifically because of the personalities of the characters, I think made this feel sweeping to me. Okay, now, I had to recommend Mary Bellog, who is one of my favorite authors, and I think that of all of the Mary Bellogs that I've read, I think her newest book, this is the beginning of a new series, it was just published this year, it's called Remember Love. I think this fits the bill for a sweeping romance best, in my opinion, and I think that's largely because there's a war involved, there is a big dramatic scene which tears them apart in the beginning, there is this really powerful connection that they had in the beginning, there's a little bit of a feuding family dynamic in here, a broken family, and I just think that this has a great setup for a period drama film, and I think that that is often what I think of when I think of sweeping romance. I loved this. You do get a good bit of backstory into the family, but not anything that necessarily slows down the pace of the book, because I don't know, I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. And Mary's writing style, which is very quietly powerful, I think really lends itself to sweeping romances really well. And I thought that was very evident in this book. Okay, just a couple more. One book that is for sure going to be on my top 10 of the year. Maybe top 3. Maybe my top 3 romances are in this video. They might be. But it's one of my favorite books I've read this year, and it is A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall. This book is so heartbreakingly beautiful. I was absolutely shocked at how powerful and emotional this book was. I think it was lovely in every aspect. And when I was talking earlier about when the characters, the hero and the heroine, or if they're same sex or whatever, when they have this feeling of they want to trust, they want to initiate intimacy or build an intimacy, an emotional intimacy with each other, but they're a little bit tentative and a little bit cautious. And then the way that the other character sort of accepts that to let them know that they're safe with them, like, I just die over that. I die over it. It's one of my favorite, I don't know that you could call it a trope, but it's one of my favorite things that happens in romance. And I don't think it happens very often, but it did here. And this actually was the book that was able to allow me to finally put that feeling into words. And I just loved it so, so much. This is also a friends to lovers, and the heroine is actually a trans woman. And their journey to finding love and acceptance was just so beautiful. I could not even handle it. This is a fairly long book, but I just adored these characters so much that I was just eating it up. It didn't feel long to me. It just felt beautiful and compelling, and I loved it so much. Okay, now the last book that I think is a sweeping romance is A Caribbean Heiress in Paris by Adriana Herrera. This is also a new release this year. I really enjoyed this book, and one of the things that I loved most about it is the beautiful setting and the unique settings. Like, it's set in the Caribbean, it's set in Paris. There are several different settings. The hero is a Scotsman, and it just had a lot of diversity in it, but it also had some very interesting character dynamics and relationship dynamics. She is like the heiress to a whiskey. I believe it's whiskey. Maybe it's rum. I don't know my liquor. It's rum. She's the heiress to a rum business, and she's trying to make a go of it because, you know, she's the only one who's trying to make money and support her and her sister. And the hero is also, I think his is maybe whiskey. I actually don't remember. It's some type of alcohol. I'm thinking rum because of Caribbean, and I'm thinking whiskey because he's a Scotsman, but truthfully, I know very little about alcohol. But I loved the setting of this. I loved our fierce heroine, and I also really loved the connection that they had and how much the hero was willing to sacrifice to help her to meet her goals. I just felt like that was really, really beautiful. So a large part of why I love this and why I put this in here is because of the setting. The setting is kind of a main character here. This would have a completely different feel if it was set in England. It wouldn't hit the same at all, but the setting in here, the Caribbean setting, was just so beautiful and unique that I absolutely loved it, and I thought it was a great time. So, all right, there you have it. Those are my recommendations. I think that I forgot to mention, this is a collaboration with my dear friend Sam from Books with Samantha. She will also have a video. I'll have it linked down below. And I'm so grateful she asked me to do this because this is a video I've been wanting to make for a long time, but you know, I sometimes put it off because life is busy. Also, I hope you enjoyed my tiny microphone. This is a new addition. I don't know how long I'm going to keep it up, but thank you so much for watching. If you have any recommendations for books that you feel like are sweeping romances, please let us know in the comments below, and I'll see y'all in my next video.